Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU Audiobooks. Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Continuing Education, Certificate Programs, Certificate in Nutrition and Child Care, CNCC-2 Organizing Child Care Services, Block 2, The Child, Development in the First 12 Month, Unit-10 Socio-emotional Development, The Early Relationships. 10.1 Introduction. In Unit 7 we had briefly touched upon the socio-emotional aspects of the infant's development, where there was a mention of love and nurturance as essentials of care. You are aware that the term social refers to that aspect of development concerned with human interactions. In early social relationships, emotions such as love, delight, and distress come into play. These two aspects of development, social and emotional, generally occur together and are studied under the head of socio-emotional development. In this unit we will read about the social and emotional experiences of the child up to 1 year of age. How does the infant form a relationship with the parents? Why is a supportive and well-adapted relationship between the child and parents important? When does the infant show an interest in other children? How does the baby learn to trust others and communicate her affection towards them? You will read about such aspects in this unit. Objectives. After studying this unit, you will be able to describe those behaviors of the caregiver and infant that promote social interaction and attachment. Explain how the attachment bond forms between the caregiver and the infant. Understand the importance of developing trust in the caregivers. State the meaning of terms stranger anxiety and separation anxiety. Describe the emotional expressions of the infant. Describe how heredity and environment influence social and emotional development. 10.2 The early interactions. The newborn needs consistent care and nurturance from a person if she is to survive. She communicates her feelings and needs to the people who look after her and, in turn, reacts to their responses. It may seem surprising that an infant who does not talk and may not even smile in the first few weeks has social skills to interact with people. The adults too must be able to attract the baby's attention, and they do so effectively. Thus the caregiver and the infant have behaviors that will help them in interaction with each other and enable them to develop a bond with each other. Let us read about these behaviors in detail. 10.2.1 Behaviors of the caregivers. Most of us display specific kinds of behavior while interacting with infants. These behaviors usually bring forth a response from the baby. Even children as young as 4 years of age seem to know how to attract a baby's attention. Physical contact. Infants and older children have an inborn need for physical contact. In fact, touch is crucial in the development of the emotional bond between the caregiver and the child. Babies must be held not only in the course of routine feeding, bathing and changing clothes, but also be picked up and cuddled for sheer pleasure. When the mother holds the infant in her arms, the baby feels secure. This can be seen clearly from the infant's behavior. She may get frightened by a loud noise when alone, but remains undisturbed by a similar noise when in the arms of the mother. Speech. When we talk with the infant, we tend to use baby talk. This is a very specific form of speech not used with an older child, say a 2-year-old. Baby talk has very short sentences, simple words, certain modulations of voice and nonsense sounds such as clucking noises. You must have observed that even children as young as 4 and 5 years old use baby talk with the infant. This type of utterance delights the infant and she usually responds by cooing or babbling. As you know, such an interaction helps to build an emotional bond between the infant and the caregiver. Smiling. A smile initiates a social relationship. We smile when we wish to communicate warmth, acceptance and recognition. Most people smile when communicating with the infant, even if she does not smile in return. Gradually, the smile of the caregiver becomes a signal for the infant to smile back, to express delight, and to begin cooing and babbling. Facial expressions. Almost all adults and children, while interacting with a baby, exaggerate their facial expressions. Sometimes they show mock surprise by raising the eyebrows, wrinkling the forehead, opening the mouth and smiling widely. The baby usually smiles at this expression. At other times, the adults show mock anger or pleasure. When not wanting to communicate with the infant, they keep their expression neutral. The child learns to discriminate the various emotional expressions and to understand when the adult is intending to maintain, end or avoid a social interaction. Gazing. While talking to a person, we normally look at him or her. Looking away from the person may be a signal that we wish to terminate the contact. This eye-to-eye contact is the basis of all direct communication. Caregivers normally gaze at the infant while interacting with her and while taking care of her routine needs. Initially, the infant may look at the mother only occasionally and is able to hold her gaze for only a few seconds. Gradually, she is able to look at her for longer periods. This mutual gazing is most important in establishing a link between the two and is one of the first forms of socio-emotional interaction. You know that the newborn sees things most clearly when they are at a distance of 8 to 10 inches from her face. The distance between the infant's eyes and the mother's face during feeding is usually about 8 inches. Most of us, while playing with the baby, maintain this distance. Thus it seems that our natural posture and body movements help in developing an emotional bond with the baby. Movements and rhythms. When we play with an infant, we nod, shake our head from side to side or bring it forward. These head movements serve to maintain the attention of the infant. During a game of peekaboo with the baby, the mother hides her face behind her hands and then uncovers it again. This is one of the all-time favorite infant games played by caregivers across cultures. Some sounds and movements that caregivers make are soothing to babies, probably because they are like the movements they experienced in the womb. You may have noticed that people in most cultures usually hold the baby on the left side. In this position, the baby can feel the beat of the heart, a rhythm which she has heard in the womb, and usually calms down if she is crying. Rocking, swaying and similar rhythmic motions are also soothing to her. When the baby is soothed, it is gratifying for the mother. She feels that she is handling the infant well. This strengthens her affectionate feelings towards the child. Thus you see how the behaviors of the adults contribute towards developing a social relationship and an emotional bond with the infant. Check your progress. 1. List in the space provided below the 6 behaviors of caregivers that help in attracting the infant's attention and serve to maintain social interaction. 10.2.2 Abilities and behaviors of the infant. We have just discussed how caregivers devise ways of communicating with infants. Infants also initiate behavior to make social contact. These are gazing, crying, smiling, babbling and imitation. Besides these, the infant's sensory abilities also help in interaction. Let us read about the abilities and behaviors of the infant that help her to develop a relationship with people around her. Sensory abilities. You have read about the sensory capacities of the newborn and the infant in Units 7 and 9. Let us see how they help in social relationships. You know that the newborn is responsive to the human voice and can tell her mother's voice from other female voices as early as the first week of life. A crying baby often becomes calm at the sound of the parent's voice, particularly the mother's, without even being picked up. Because of this ability of the infant to attend to speech, adults use speech as a means of attracting child infant's attention successfully. The infant's visual skills also help her in social interaction. You know that babies like to look at the faces of people. Gazing, as you know, promotes social interaction. Gradually, the infant learns to discriminate the mother from others on the basis of her face, smell and sound, and reacts differently to her than to other people. The infant's ability to recognize the parents is very important from their perspective. It makes them feel that the infant is responding to them specifically. They feel loving towards the child, and this, in turn, strengthens their nurturing and caregiving activities. Gradually, the infant begins to recognize her grandparents, brothers and sisters, and other people in the house. There is an increase in the number of people she knows. You know that by 6 months of age, most infants are able to discriminate the different emotional expressions such as delight, anger, or fear. This emerging ability of the infant is important for two reasons. Firstly, by looking at the parent's face, she is able to make out their reaction to an object, event, or person, and this helps her to judge its value, importance, and desirability. You would have seen, for example, when the infant is offered a new toy, she usually looks at the mother. If her expression conveys fear, the infant will leave the toy and move towards her. Secondly, by learning to understand facial expressions, the baby is beginning to interpret movements and expressions. One of the first tasks in social interaction is to understand what people are thinking and feeling. By discriminating the different expressions of the face, the infant is acquiring the important skill of reading people. Through her interactions in the early months, she strengthens and develops this skill further and is able to respond to subtle cues, behaviors. Let us now read about the infant's behaviors, which also play a very important role in attracting adult attention and prolonging it. 1. Gazing and smiling. You have read that when the newborn begins to fix her gaze on the face of the caregiver, a relationship develops between the two. The infant practices eye-to-eye contact from the first week of life. We are all familiar with the sight of a newborn smiling in her sleep. This type of smile is in response to the brain's internal activity. During the first month, the infant also smiles if she hears high-pitched sounds. These smiles are not directed at people and are not necessarily indicators of warmth or social awareness. It is between 2.5 to 3 months of age that the infant begins to smile at people. Smiling, like crying, is an early means of communication. Now the smile becomes social, i.e., a human face accompanied by a human voice causes the infant to smile. In the beginning, babies smile readily at the sight of all human faces, familiar or unfamiliar. Then they smile more at familiar than at strange faces. The baby's social smile accompanied by gazing is pleasing to the caregivers.
They feel contented and proud and increase their protective behaviors towards her. They smile back, talk to and cuddle the infant. In fact, a serious, irritable baby may not evoke the same attention from adults. When the adults smile and gaze in return to the infant's smile, it tells her that she can have an effect on people. Thus, long before the baby can talk, she has discovered a means to communicate. She has learnt that a smile can get her many things: cuddles, talk, play, or a toy. 2. Crying. Crying is the main way by which the infant attracts help and care. Crying brings the adult to her side more quickly than any other behavior. Depending upon what the caregiver thinks the child needs, she may feed her, change her dress, or pick her up. Early in life, babies cry mainly when they are hungry or wet or in pain. Later, by about 6 months of age, the infant uses crying as a means of directing the adult's attention to her even when she is not in distress. She cries because she is bored and wants to be picked up or talked to. Thus she uses crying to elicit a social response from the caregivers. By 1 year, the total amount of crying decreases by almost 50% of what it was at 3 months. This gives the infant and parents more time for positive social behaviors such as gazing, Smiling, babbling and imitation. Responding to the infant's cry is important because it helps to foster a feeling of trust in her. The child feels sure that if she is in distress, somebody will come to her. This helps her to develop a sense of trust. Parents who are sensitive and responsive to the child's crying have children who cry less. You will read more about the development of trust in the latter part of this unit. 3. Cooing and babbling. Once the infant begins to coo and babble, the interaction between her and the people increases dramatically. When the baby imitates sounds, it makes adults around her want to play with her and their dialogues become more varied. 4. Imitation. Around 1 year of age, infants also imitate certain other behaviors. They may copy blinking of the eyes, certain rocking movements of the body or other gestures. When the infant mimics or copies an action, the adult produces more behaviors that the infant can imitate, thus prolonging the social interaction. Such social interactions are natural as well as healthy for the infant's socio-emotional development. The infant is likely to imitate those with whom she has formed an emotional attachment. The above discussion indicates that the child is prepared from birth onwards for relating to people. Communicating with people gives the infant a chance to practice and refine social skills she already has and to develop new ones. After having read this section, can you identify the social skills the infant displays? They are turn-taking, smiling, recognizing people and understanding the meaning of facial expressions and body movements.
Check your progress. A. How do the infant's sensory abilities aid in social interaction and help her to form a bond with caregivers? B. List the social skills that the infant acquires and refines during the first year of life. C. How does being able to discriminate the different emotional expressions on the caregiver's face help the child? 10.3. Development of attachment. In the earlier section, we have spoken about the behaviors and the abilities of the infant and the caregivers that help them in interacting with each other. But how does a relationship between the infant and the caregiver actually develop from day to day? Let us read about this aspect now. From the first time the mother holds the baby and gazes at her, a communication begins between the two. In fact, it is believed that an initial bond may be formed between them in the first few hours after birth, since many newborns are alert and can make eye contact in this period. This also gives a sense of well-being to the newborn. It is generally recommended that the baby be given to the mother immediately after birth. Subsequently, during the caregiving activities of feeding, bathing and putting the baby to sleep, their relationship strengthens. But what is it about these caregiving activities that promotes attachment? Let us look at the interaction during a typical feeding situation to understand this. When the baby is hungry, the mother picks her up and feeds her. The infant feels the touch of the mother's body and hears her voice. Before and after feeding, the mother talks to the baby, plays with her and tickles her. Thus, along with satisfying the infant's hunger, the mother also provides physical contact and social stimulation by smiling, talking and playing, which is the basis for developing mutual affection. Through similar interactions every day, an affectional bond, called attachment, forms between them. Attachment is an emotional bond between two people and, in this case, refers to the bond between the mother and the infant. Infants become attached to people who take care of them. In most cases, it is the mother who primarily looks after the baby and the infant usually becomes attached to her. This is the infant's first social relationship. If the feeding situation is not warm and pleasant, attachment to the caregiver may not occur. If the mother is tense, holds the baby awkwardly or handles her roughly, the baby will associate discomfort with the mother's presence. When such painful experiences occur often, the infant may become anxious during feeding time. If other experiences of the baby with the mother are also not happy, she will become irritable. You have read about children living in institutions. Their physical needs are generally fulfilled, but emotional interaction with adults is missing. You know that in such cases children are not able to form attachments. Thus we see that attachment is a two-way process and the behavior of the infant and the caregivers contribute towards it. At this juncture it is important to restate one point. The infant does not form an attachment with the mother simply because physical needs are met. More important than this is the close contact with the mother and the social stimulation that creates an emotional bond. Parents who consistently respond in a loving and nurturing manner to the child seem to make the child feel emotionally secure. Such parents are warm in handling babies. They smile more often, touch the infant lovingly and use their voices in expressive ways. In contrast, when caregivers avoid the baby, do not initiate physical contact and are inconsistent in their responses, at times loving and at times avoidant, the child does not form a secure attachment. How do we know that an attachment exists between the infant and the adult? Infants show their attachment to people by seeking their attention and by trying to gain their approval and affection. They become upset when separated from those they love. They approach these adults for comfort when distressed and are soothed by them. Infants also look to these people for encouragement, smile more at them and explore their surroundings confidently when these people are present. In a new situation or when confronted with a new object, the child first looks at the adult with whom she has developed attachment to see how she is reacting, i.e., she uses this person for clues about a new situation. A secure infant smiles more, cries less, is ready to explore and does not cling to the mother fearfully all the time. Attachment to the father. In the unit, while describing the emotional relationships, we have spoken mostly about the mother. In general, the mother is the most important person in the infant's life. But what about the father? The father has an equally important role to play. He is just as capable of caring for the baby as the mother. He can be just as nurturing, responsive and sensitive. If the father interacts with the baby right from birth and spends time playing with her and looking after her, the baby develops strong emotional bonds with the father as well, forming more relationships. After this first strong bond with one or two persons, the baby gradually forms more relationships. By the end of the first year, she forms emotional bonds with other people in the family such as grandparents, sisters, brothers, aunts and uncles, all those persons who play an important role in caring for her. If there are children around, those a few years older than the infant will get along with her much better than those close to her age. The older ones will be tolerant of her, while her aggranates would be unable to play cooperatively. Older children play with the infant readily and delight in doing simple caregiving activities.
Secondly, developing trust influences the child's exploratory behavior and the quality of play. We are all familiar with the sight of an infant moving towards an unfamiliar object. She picks it up, examines it and takes it back to show it to her mother. But this exploration requires considerable courage. The infant has to move some distance away from the mother and it is possible that the new object can cause harm. She is aware of this, but she still moves towards it because she trusts the mother and uses her as a safe base from where to explore the world. Infants who feel secure will play away from the mother, glancing at her once in a while to make sure she is still there. Later, they will go into another room or into the open, away from her physical presence. By contrast, the infant who has not developed trust feels insecure and is fearful of new situations and events. When the mother is not consistent in her care of the child is not sure whether she will come to her help. She does not venture or try out new things, instead she clings to the mother. It has also been observed that infants with secure attachment have higher self-esteem and show less aggressive behavior during the preschool years. They also show more empathy towards other adults and children. Secure or insecure attachment thus has long-term effect on the child's personality. Once the infant begins to move around, she is often into places that are dangerous and picks things that are harmful for her. She has to understand that some things are forbidden. She may get into a rage when you prevent her from doing something she wants to do. It is better to discipline the baby gently through mock anger and verbal explanation. Hitting or slapping her is harmful. For example, if the infant insists on going out of the door, you could say no first, shut the door and try to distract her. As a last resort, you could look angry. The baby is likely to get the cue. 10.5 Emotional expressions. While adults have a variety of emotional expressions, this is not so in the case of infants. In fact, the newborn does not have clearly differentiated emotions. In the first year of life, the infant primarily shows two emotional states: delight and distress. She expresses delight by smiling or laughing. Talking to the baby, tickling, cuddling and playing with the baby are likely to delight her. Distress is expressed mostly through crying. Unexpected loud noise or a strange object causes fear in the infant. Stranger anxiety and separation anxiety, about which you will read further, also cause distress. The baby also shows extreme anger or rage by crying out loudly, kicking her legs and flapping her arms. Anger at this age is usually expressed in response to physical discomfort. Towards the end of the year, when the infant seems to be acquiring a will of her own, rage may also be expressed as you take away a toy or separate her forcibly from her mother.
When the infant receives nurture and care from several caregivers apart from the parents, she also learns to trust other people early in life. Socially, she has a wider sphere of familiar individuals, and this has a beneficial influence on her social development. 10.4 Learning to trust. The reason why we have spoken about attachment in detail is that it is important for the infant to form a secure attachment with the primary caregiver. When the child experiences affection consistently, she develops a feeling of trust. Developing trust and a sense of security is important since it influences later behavior to a considerable extent. Let us see how. Firstly, an infant who has experienced a warm relationship with her caregiver in the first year of life is likely to view other adults she comes in contact with later as safe and friendly. Such a child finds it pleasurable to interact with people and forms emotional ties with them. Research has shown that securely attached infants are more social during preschool years and are more popular with peers. In contrast, an infant who is unable to form a secure attachment with the mother in the first year of life begins to mistrust people. Since her first relationship has not been a rewarding one, she may feel that other adults will also cause her distress. The feeling of mistrust in the primary caregiver generalizes to other adults. Research has shown that when children did not experience normal love and affection in the first few years, particularly in the first year of life, they withdrew from social interactions, found it difficult to relate to people, and sometimes were unable to form emotional ties at all. Of course, a person needs to form close relationships throughout life, but the relationship with the primary caregiver is particularly important. It has a lasting effect on one's social and personality development. There is a link between early experiences and later behavior, but there are individual differences in how children are affected by early experiences. Some children may be more affected than others by the lack of love in early years. However, human beings are resilient, i.e., they can recover from unpleasant experiences or deprivations. It may happen that an infant abandoned early in life may be recompensed by consistent warmth and care later on. In such a case, there may be no permanent damage to the personality.
10.5.1 Stranger anxiety. Have you ever tried approaching infants between 5 and 12 months of age who are not familiar with you? If you have, the chances are that most would have shown fear at your approach. The typical behavior of the infant in such situations is as follows. She studies the stranger's face for some time, then her face tightens and she begins to cry. If the stranger leaves, the child becomes quiet. The infant is showing stranger anxiety. This is a direct result of her attachment with the parents. Once attached, infants become upset on seeing an unfamiliar adult. Such anxiety shows its beginning around 6 months and reaches its peak between 8 and 12 months, gradually disappearing between 15 and 18 months. The infant is less likely to show fear of the stranger if she is with the mother. Of course, There are variations in the fear response of infants, some being very fearful, some only slightly so, and others not fearful at all. 10.5.2 Separation anxiety. A little after infants become aware of strangers, they begin to develop anxiety about being separated from those to whom they are attached. You would have seen that around 10 or 11 months of age many infants spend a considerable time following parents from room to room, making sure they are available when needed. As long as the parents are within sight, the infants will play and explore even in unfamiliar situations. But when separated from the parents, they get distressed. This fear is referred to as separation anxiety. It is at its peak around 12 to 18 months of age and disappears between 20 and 24 months of age. Researchers have found certain trends in studies of infants separated from their parents. When separated for several days, the infants at first cry and search for their parents. When they do not find them, they become irritable or lethargic. Later they may begin to behave like younger infants, so that they start creeping even though they had learned to walk, or begin to soil clothes even though they had learned bowel control. Parents who leave their 8 to 24-month-old infants with others and return, after several days or weeks, may find the infants indifferent towards them. The infants appear withdrawn and may not recognize their parents. If the parents are loving, the baby once again approaches them with warmth but may be unusually demanding of their attention. Fortunately, these behaviors gradually change. The parents should handle the child with understanding and not with guilt or anger. 10.6 Daycare for children. Research on daycare has revealed that attending a daycare center is not harmful for the child's overall development, provided the quality of care is good. Since the foundations for later development are laid in the first few years, the creche has to provide a congenial environment. This depends on the caregivers at the center and on the physical environment. In some creches, infants are looked after by 2 or more caregivers, who may come to the creche in shifts. This may cause some problems. Since babies prefer known faces to unknown ones, there must not be a frequent change of caregivers in a daycare center. Parents often have a fear that if they leave the child in a daycare center, she will become more attached to the person who looks after her. But this is not true. Research has shown that infants and toddlers who go to creches are as strongly attached to their parents as those who stay at home. They always prefer their mother to any daycare worker, however loving the latter may be. 10.7 Role of heredity and environment. You know that there are no genes for anger, fear, jealousy or dislike, for being friendly or unfriendly, an extrovert or an introvert. Genes affect social development indirectly. There are some temperamental differences among children which are inborn. Some infants are more irritable than others, become upset or distressed easily and are difficult to soothe. Some show a lot of bodily movement and activity and seem restless. Some children are more social than others, preferring to be with people. Some cry frequently and others are calm. There seems to be some hereditary basis for this. You have read that the infant seems to be innately prepared to respond to people. Her developing sensory capacities also contribute greatly to her social and emotional development, as you have read in this unit. But it is largely her experiences, i.e., the environment, that will determine the type of person she eventually becomes. For example, if the infant does not receive love, she will not be able to develop trust. Attachment develops because of interactions between the baby and caregivers. 10.8 Interrelationship among various areas of development. In this block we have talked about the infant's accomplishments in each area of development: physical, motor, cognitive, language, social and emotional. You know from your reading of Block 1 that each area of development influences the others, and this must have become clear to you as you read the units of this block. Let us briefly review this. The maturation of the sensory organs and other parts of the body, i.e., physical development, helps the child to acquire motor skills. Motor skills enable the infant to explore her surroundings and thus promote cognitive development. She is also able to do many things and to act upon the objects around her. This helps her to develop feelings of confidence, independence and positive self-esteem. Thus, physical development also helps in social and emotional development. The maturation of the organs for hearing and speech enables the infant to acquire language. The development of cognition directly influences functioning in other areas. As the Baby's thought matures. She is able to handle more and more situations by herself, which helps her to develop a positive self-concept. The acquisition of language is very closely related to cognitive development. The influence of social development is also visible in other areas. A positive social relationship helps the infant to feel secure. Only when a child feels secure is she able to direct her attention towards other aspects of the environment. A secure infant explores, which help her to learn and thus fosters cognitive development. A positive relationship with the caregiver is conducive for language development. As the infant acquires language, she is able to communicate with more people and is able to do so more effectively. Her social sphere widens and she forms relationships and attachments with more people. Using language, the child is able to express her thoughts, ask questions about things she does not understand, and plan her actions. This helps her to learn. Language also aids in perception and memory. 10.9 Summing up. In this unit you have read how the infant forms relationships with people in the first year of life. The infant needs care and nurturance if she is to survive. She effectively elicits care from adults. She is able to communicate and interact with them. It may be a little difficult to believe, but the infant has a collection of behaviors that helps her attract the attention of adults. She gazes, smiles, babbles, imitates and cries a love, which evoke adult response. Her perceptual skills are also adapted for social interaction. Just as infants devise ways of communication, the adults also have behaviors that facilitate their interaction with her. The speech of the adults, their facial expressions, head movements, smiling and gazing draw the infant's attention. Through daily interactions during feeding, bathing, playing and talking, an emotional bond forms between the mother and the child. This attachment of the infant to her primary caregiver is her first emotional relationship, and it has an important role to play in the child's personality development. An infant who forms a secure attachment with the mother trusts people and forms other attachments. An infant who does not have a loving relationship with the caregiver in the first year of life learns to distrust people and avoid social contact. Another reason why it is important for the infant to develop trust is that it influences her exploratory behavior. An infant who is attached to a person approaches her in distress, smiles and gazes more at her, seeks her attention and becomes upset when separated from her. Towards the end of the first year, the child begins to form attachments with other people who interact daily with her, such as brothers and sisters, grandparents, uncles and aunts. In this unit you have also read about the emotions of the infant. The newborn has two emotional expressions: delight and distress. Other emotions like fear and anger emerge during the first year. The infant shows stranger anxiety and separation anxiety.